Have you ever been in a war zone? Vietnam or Bosnia? Cancer? Or divorce? Or cold calls? Incredibly, this war zone for me involved 100 little babies, all laying 3 and 4 to a cardboard box strapped in the belly of a gutted cargo jet. It was 1975. Saigon was falling to the communists. And I was accidentally caught up in the Vietnam orphan airlift.
I have directed that money from a $2 million special foreign aid children's fund be made available to fly 2,000 South Vietnamese orphans to the United States as soon as possible.
You know, some people say, oh, LeAnn, you were so brave to have done that. And I like to think that bravery played a part. But the truth is, naivete and faith played even more. Because, friends, I was no hero. I was just an ordinary person caught up in this extraordinary circumstance. And yet this 10-day adventure taught me lessons that changed my whole life and may change yours. Because we don't have to fly to Vietnam to be in a war zone, do we? We all have war zones in our everyday lives. What is yours? So, on April 1st, 1975, April Fool's Day, that could have been a hint. I kissed those precious little girls goodbye, walked out of Mark's arms, boarded a 747, and headed for Saigon. Have you heard the news? President Gerald Ford has okayed Operation Baby Lift. You're not going to take out 6 babies as we planned. You'll help take out 300 if we're lucky. But by the time I got there, see, they were bringing all the babies in from the foster home and bringing them to the orphanage center. So every inch of floor was covered with a mat or a sheet. And every inch of sheet or floor was covered with a baby. Seas and seas of vagabonding, burping babies. And until I wrote my book about it some 20 years later, my friends and family knew very little about what happened to me there. When you've had dramatic events in your life, did it take you a long time, too, to sort out the meaning and the purpose of it all? Why did this happen to me? And what am I supposed to be learning from it? I spent months, probably years, trying to sort all that out. And what I realized is the war zones that I had in Vietnam really are not unlike the war zones we have in our lives today. Too much to do and not enough resources to get it all done. A lot of people counting on you, and you're trying to be there for them. And trying to do your very, very best and feeling like sometimes you're working with one hand tied behind your back. And having that pull between home and work and family and volunteerism. And because the war zones are so similar, the lessons that I learned apply. And I learned so many lessons. But still it's hard, isn't it? Even with support, it's hard to stick to your assignments and live with the priorities in your life. It takes us through war zones. Do you ever feel like I did in Vietnam? Too weak, too tired, too confused to figure it all out and stick with it? To have the strength we need, we have to nurture ourselves and be strong physically, mentally, and spiritually, and take time every day to nurture ourselves in these 3 ways. So often we are so busy taking care of other people, we forget to take good care of ourselves. We treat ourselves in ways that we would never treat anybody else. Can you imagine saying to somebody you love, "You can't have anything to eat today. No, sir, we were just too busy." Well, maybe around 2:30 I'll throw you some junk food or something from the vending machine. We would never do that to somebody we love, but how often do we do that to ourselves? We know how to eat right. We've got volumes of books on it. But we don't nurture ourselves physically like we should every day by eating right. Or sleeping. How often do you hear yourself say, "Oh, I can get by on this many hours," or "I survive on this much sleep"? Is that what we've come to? Simply surviving and getting by? And exercise, that's an easy one for me to ignore. If you're like me, isn't it hard to carve out another chunk of time for exercise every day? We don't have time to eat and sleep. How are we going to find time to exercise? And the second part of our lives we have to balance is our mental selves. Now, I know this audience, and I know you do not need to be reminded to stay mentally active. Instead, I think you might need encouragement to allow time every day for mental rest and relaxation. And one of the best ways you can do that really is with that slow, deep, easy breathing. My second favorite mental balance tool is positive thinking. I am a big believer in the power of positive thinking. The third part of our lives we have to keep in balance is our spiritual selves. We must count on and trust in the God we believe directs and guides our life. Polls show that 98% of Americans today believe in a God. So I'm going to assume that this audience represents that same ratio. That being the case, we have to take time every day, even if it's as little as 15 minutes, to be in touch with the higher power we believe in, to get that sense of direction, to listen to that deep inner voice, which I believe is our truth. How are you going to balance your life physically, mentally, and spiritually every day? Because when our lives are in balance, we're in a place to make better decisions in our lives. And that's the second lesson I'd like to share with you today, is how do we make decisions in our life? Too often, I think, from a place of stress and chaos. To make good decisions, we have to make them from a place of peace. The third and final lesson I'm going to leave you with is one you know really well. And that is, you don't have to fly to Vietnam to make a difference in the world. But you know that every day with what you do, with all of your speaking and your training. And you don't just touch businesses, you touch lives. And I know how it feels someday to wonder, is what I'm doing really making a difference? The need is so overwhelming. And what I do is so small. Does it matter enough? Is it worth all of this? Every effort makes a difference. My daughter came home from college with an ancient Creole proverb proving that point. No effort is too small. It says, even one cockroach's urine helps make the river rise. You've worked on committee with some people with that philosophy, haven't you? I prefer a more poetic way of making that same point. And this was from a sign above a doorway in Vietnam, where an American plastic surgeon set up a clinic for those children that were burned and disfigured by the war. And the sign above the doorway read, "It's better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness." And that's what you do every day with all that you do. And when you light your candles, you inspire others to light theirs. And then they go on and inspire others to light theirs. And you literally set the world aglow with your goodness. And I look at my family today and I think this is the whole Airlift Experience full circle. Doesn't get better than this. And the truth is, my friends, it doesn't get better than this. But then I was invited to a reunion. The 25th reunion of Operation Baby Lift. And I got to stand before 100 young men and women, some of whom I brought out. They called and said, President Gerald Ford lives here part of the time, and he wonders, could he meet you? He wonders, could he have his picture taken with you? I said, I don't know, I'm pretty busy. And I'm so privileged to have had a 30-minute private audience with President Gerald Ford. And I'm humbled to think that I could say anything that would touch a former president. But I said, sir, have you considered the happiness and the goodness that your courageous decision of Operation Baby Lift brought? And he admitted he hadn't. He was on to the next crisis. So I gave him a copy of my book. I gave him that photo of all those kids gathered at the reunion, and I gave him a picture of Mitch. And I said, this photo of my son represents 1/3,000th of the goodness and joy you brought. Because of you, 3,000 children were saved. And I think, boy, it doesn't get better than this. And all this, my friends, from buying a dozen cupcakes and making those right but not easy decisions. And I know sometimes that you wonder whether you're making enough of a difference, and I have to admit, you'll probably never be in a third world country and brush dust off and see your own handwriting on a box, Or you may not see directly the results of your efforts as much as I have. But don't be mistaken. The difference you're making is just as great. When you balance your life, physically, mentally, and spiritually every day, when you make those right, but not always easy decisions, your life will go from the ordinary to the extraordinary. Because you, my friends, my colleagues, you are the heroes. And I applaud you. Thank you.